Welcome to Research Tuesday. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Harris, and today we're going to be talking about a study looking at the microbiome and the impacts of the microbiome on our metabolism. So let's dive right on into the study. So there's been reports of links to a compound called TMAO, which stands for trimethylamine N oxide. So that's a big fancy word. That TMAO is linked to cardiovascular disease. And this is one of the reasons that anti-meat proponents say don't eat meat because, the choline, the glycine in meat gets turned into TMA, trimethylamine, and that goes and circulates to the liver, gets turned into TMAO, and that increases plaque deposition and atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. But this study was taking a look at the microbiome and how our microbiome impacts this. So we know that our gut microbiome is very active and that there are things that our microbiome does as far as metabolizing the foods we eat. So this study looked at a particular type of bacteria called Bilophilia, and Bilophilia is basically bile-loving bacteria. That's what it means. And this is a bacteria that was initially associated and found with digesting bile acids, things that our gallbladder makes, but it was also associated with abscesses and infections in some people, but it's also found in good numbers in healthy volunteers, and we'll get into that more in a minute. So some of these meat byproducts, including choline, phosphatidylcholine, and carnitine, which have benefit, there's a lot of benefit to these products, can get turned into TMA by gut microorganisms, and that circulates through our body, goes to the liver, and gets turned into TMAO, which is a CVD, or cardiovascular disease causing agent. So the authors wanted to look at, okay, where does our microbiome otherwise impact TMAO levels? And so they looked at this specific bacterial Bilophilia, and they found that in an interesting process called genetic code expansion, where basically the bacteria are able to change the way that their proteins are made, are able to take these precursors, the choline, the carnitine, the glycine, and digest them into metabolites that make the less TMA available to circulate to the liver. So you get less TMA available for the blood, and so you have less TMAO being produced in the liver, with less cardiovascular disease. And I think this is a really interesting study. The study was pretty technical, but the key takeaway here is that this species of bacteria uses genetic code expansion to produce a TMA methyltransferase, which basically makes it so the TMA is not getting into the blood. It's getting transferred to another pathway. And this happens specifically in people who eat more meat. So it's interestingly enough, when you eat more meat, this bacteria becomes more abundant in the gut. And then it also changes its protein synthesis, changes the way it works to be better able to degrade meat products and prevent this toxic metabolite from happening. And in people who had more cardiovascular disease, they had less abundance of this bacteria. And so this is really interesting because it's starting to link the microbiome to all different kinds of things. Now we're seeing a microbiome portion is directly responsible for helping to protect us from cardiovascular disease. Now, more studies need to be done on this, but I think it's an interesting observation with the microbiome, and it's an interesting portion of how we're starting to see that our gut health is so impactful to our overall health. And you can see a normal mechanism here where this bacteria should increase and should undergo this genetic code expansion to help protect us from cardiovascular disease doesn't seem to happen in people who have more cardiovascular disease, but it does happen in healthy controls. And that's very interesting. And of course, we need to do more research to find out why, but I bet it's related to some of the cardiovascular risk factors, nutrition, lack of exercise, smoking. All of these things damage our microbiome. So by doing the things that we need to do to keep us healthy, we're keeping our microbiome healthy, and our microbiome shifts and changes based upon our needs. And there's data that shows this. This is another study that shows this. And so we have to really make sure we take care of our gut, really make sure we're doing what we need for gut health. And that's why a lot of our wellness programs are targeted specifically for gut health, the nutrition, the exercise, all of that is important and imperative to gut health. Of course, we have our link below for our wellness programs. And I hope you found this informative. I hope that you see that there's so much that goes on with our gut and linking our health and our microbiome and our health. These bacteria are our friends, literally are life-saving, are life-transforming, and we would not be healthy without good commensal bacteria. So thank you for listening and have a blessed evening.